Well, that's the question. The question is there anything I wish I had learned in college or that my employees learned in college? Yeah, that is a really good question. First of all, I don't think everyone needs to learn this. But if you're trying to do something that entrepreneurs do, you have to have a very broad education. You have to know a little bit about everything. You can't be just a specialist in something. You have to know finance, you have to know legal, you have to know employee issues, you have to know a lot of stuff. I guess one of the things that really surprised me is how little they teach you about finance in general. When I went through an engineering school, you know, but even, I think even, I'm not sure, you know, but I shouldn't say this, but maybe even in business school they don't teach you enough about it. I'm not sure. But, you know, there's just so many things about the way the world works, about how things are structured, and there seems to be a huge number of things that have to do with corporate issues, financing issues, and structure and legal issues that just aren't taught. It just didn't seem like they're taught. Maybe that's not true, and maybe I just wasn't exposed to it. But I certainly didn't have access to it when I went to college about, you know, basics. You know, like, you know, how many parents don't teach their kids how to balance a checkbook, right? A lot. And they figure it out on their own later. Well, there's some basic things about business which they don't, you know, I didn't have a chance to learn when I was in engineering school. And I probably would have if they were presented in a good fashion. But I think it's that sort of broad thing. Another thing that's I had to learn a lot was a lot of legal stuff. The nature of, you know, really the nature of patents and the real process you go through in dealing with them and litigation and so on. I'm not sure how well you could teach it in advance because it's always more relevant when you're there and someone just sued you, right? But there are a lot of things like that. Another thing I think would be useful, something I learned from Donna, is really about employee issues as well. This, I'll give you a lesson that she told me. This goes back to the integrity thing we mentioned earlier. But when you're starting a business and you're hiring people, you tend not to focus on the issues of pay scales and creating you know, human resources, employee guidelines and things like this. When I hired Don, I had like 10 employees. And the first thing she comes in, she says, all right, we need to get a human resources policy right away. We have to have a stock and salaries things right away, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're working really hard here. We just started this company. Why do we have to worry about this stuff? She goes, oh, no, you have to lay the foundation right away. Because what happens, you have these discrepancies and problems, and they fester, and then when your company gets bigger, it's all these problems. And so she was absolutely right. And also, she told me that what you should do, when you're thinking about compensation between people, you should always imagine that everybody knows everything. So if you're trying to figure out how much to pay employee X and how much to pay employee Y, assume that they know. And they assume that you have to justify it to them, to their face. And that you should never get in a situation where because someone, for whatever reason, you have this inequity there because you shouldn't get in that position. So there's things like that which I thought were sort of general lessons that you should just know, and somehow maybe you could teach them. I don't know. I don't know if you could or not.